The fog hung heavy in the air as Sarah stood at the water's edge, gazing out at the massive hulk of the abandoned cruise ship that loomed ominously before her. It was a decrepit vessel, once a luxurious haven for vacationers seeking paradise on the open seas. Now, it was a ghostly relic, lost in the middle of a fog-covered ocean. Sarah, a skeptical journalist known for her daring investigations, had received an anonymous tip about the ship's mysterious disappearance years ago. The tip spoke of an expedition led by Captain Reynolds, a grizzled sea captain with a haunted past, who had ventured into the heart of the ocean to uncover the truth about this forsaken vessel. Intrigued by the enigmatic tale, Sarah sought out Captain Reynolds and convinced him to let her join his quest. As Sarah stepped aboard the decaying ship, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and anticipation. Captain Reynolds led the way, his lantern casting eerie shadows on the rusted walls. The ship creaked and groaned as if it were a living thing, protesting against their intrusion. "Keep close," Captain Reynolds warned, his voice low and laden with years of nautical experience. "This ship is a graveyard of secrets, and we are trespassing on hallowed ground." Sarah shivered, but her determination overrode her fear. She followed the captain deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay, and the walls seemed to close in on them. As they descended into the bowels of the ship, the darkness grew suffocating. The dim light of the lantern did little to dispel the shadows that clung to every corner. Sarah's nerves were stretched to their limit when she heard a faint, mournful whisper like a siren's call from the deep. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Captain Reynolds nodded gravely. "Aye, lass, it's the lost souls of this vessel. They speak to us, reminding us of their torment." The ghostly whispers grew louder as they moved further into the ship, their words indistinct but laden with sorrow and longing. Sarah's skepticism wavered as the oppressive atmosphere bore down on her. She began to feel as though the very walls held the memories of the ship's tragic past. They entered a large, cavernous chamber, the heart of the ship, where the ghostly crew awaited them. Transparent figures moved about, reenacting their final moments. Some tended to phantom rigging, while others stared out at the unending sea, their faces etched with despair. Sarah watched in awe and horror as the spectral sailors repeated their tasks, trapped in an eternal cycle of torment. Captain Reynolds explained that they were the remnants of the ship's original crew, forever bound to this cursed vessel. As the minutes stretched into hours, Sarah and Captain Reynolds listened to the ghosts' haunting tales. They spoke of a captain's greed and negligence, of treasure hidden in the depths of the ship, and of the storm that had swallowed them whole. Sarah realized that these spirits were prisoners of their own dark deeds, unable to move on to the afterlife until their unfinished business was resolved. Determined to help the tormented souls find peace, Sarah and Captain Reynolds followed the ghosts to the ship's hidden treasure room. But what they discovered there sent shivers down their spines. The room was filled with glittering jewels, gold, and priceless artifacts, but it was also home to something far more sinister. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. It was the vengeful spirit of Captain Bartholomew, the man responsible for the ship's tragic fate. His ghostly form flickered like a dying candle as he advanced, his voice dripping with bitterness. "You dare to intrude upon my hoard," he hissed. "You shall never leave this ship alive." The room erupted in chaos as Captain Bartholomew unleashed the full fury of his spectral wrath. Furniture flew through the air, and the very walls seemed to close in on Sarah and Captain Reynolds. They fought desperately to escape, but the malevolent spirit was relentless in his pursuit. Just as hope seemed lost, Captain Reynolds had a revelation. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered journal, which contained the captain's final confession and plea for forgiveness. With trembling hands, he read aloud the captain's words, a heartfelt admission of guilt and remorse. As Captain Reynolds read, the ghostly figure of Captain Bartholomew began to waver and fade. His anger and hatred were replaced by a profound sadness, and he gradually dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind only a mournful echo. The ship, once a place of darkness and despair, suddenly felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. The ghostly crew, now free from their tormentor's influence, began to fade away, their expressions no longer haunted. Sarah and Captain Reynolds emerged from the treasure room, shaken but victorious. They had not only uncovered the truth behind the ship's disappearance, but had also helped the lost souls find redemption and release from their eternal suffering. As they made their way back to the surface, the fog that had shrouded the ship began to lift, revealing the clear blue skies above. The ocean, once foreboding and treacherous, now glistened with newfound serenity. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if the spirits of the ship's crew were finally at peace, their restless souls able to move on to a better place. She had witnessed the consequences of greed and negligence firsthand and hoped that their story would serve as a warning to others who sought to profit at the expense of others. As they left the abandoned cruise ship behind, Sarah and Captain Reynolds shared a solemn nod, knowing that they had uncovered a tale of darkness and redemption that would haunt them for the rest of their days. The tempestuous sea raged beneath a sky cloaked in darkness, and the small fishing boat, battered and worn, bobbed up and down like a leaf in a storm. Rain lashed against the deck, and waves towered over the sides, threatening to swallow the vessel whole. Fisherman Jack clung to the wheel, his eyes wide with fear as he fought to keep the boat afloat amidst the chaos of the storm. As the relentless wind howled and rain soaked him to the bone, Jack saw something in the distance, a faint glimmer amidst the fury of the sea. He squinted through the rain-smeared window and could hardly believe his eyes. Two figures clung to a piece of wreckage, their sopping wet forms barely visible in the tempest. Without a second thought, Jack steered the boat toward the stranded figures. He knew the sea was unforgiving, but no one should face its wrath alone. As the fishing boat drew closer, he could make out the figures more clearly. Two young women, their drenched hair clinging to their faces, and their eyes, filled with an otherworldly allure, locked onto his. Their voices, barely audible above the roaring storm, carried haunting songs that seemed to tug at his very soul. Jack couldn't tear his gaze away from them, even as he extended a hand to help them aboard. Their fingers were icy and delicate, their skin smooth as porcelain. He marveled at their unearthly beauty as he pulled them to safety. "I'm Jack," he shouted over the tumultuous winds. "What brings you out here in a storm like this?" The sisters exchanged a glance, their eyes shimmering like deep, mysterious pools. The elder sister, Selene, with long ebony hair that flowed like a waterfall, spoke with an ethereal grace. "We were drawn to the sea, to its wild beauty and power. We could not resist its call." The younger sister, Thalia, had golden curls that sparkled like sunlight on the water. She spoke in a voice that sounded like the sweetest melody. "But we are grateful that you have rescued us, kind fisherman." As they spoke, Jack felt an irresistible pull, a longing he had never experienced before. It was as if the sisters' beauty and the haunting songs they sang had cast a spell upon him. He found himself entranced, unable to look away from their enchanting presence. The storm continued to rage around them, but Jack, Selene, and Thalia sat in the boat's cabin, sheltered from the wind and rain. The sisters' clothing clung to their graceful forms, revealing their alluring figures. Jack's heart raced as he struggled to focus on the conversation at hand. "We owe you our lives, Jack," Selene said, her voice like a siren's call. "Is there anything we can do to repay your kindness?" Jack hesitated, his mind clouded by desire and the eerie enchantment that surrounded the sisters. He knew it was dangerous to make bargains with those who seemed to belong to a world beyond his understanding. But the allure of the unknown was too powerful to resist. "I have a humble request," Jack finally replied. "I've always dreamed of catching the largest fish in these waters, a legendary creature known as the Leviathan. Will you help me, using your mystical knowledge of the sea?" Selene and Thalia exchanged a knowing glance, and their lips curled into enigmatic smiles. "We shall help you, Jack," Selene purred, her fingers tracing a mysterious symbol on the cabin's wooden table. "But you must promise to keep what you see and hear a secret, for our world is not meant for mortal ears." Jack eagerly agreed, and the sisters began their incantation. The storm, once fierce, seemed to respond to their commands, growing calm and still. The sea stretched out before them, its surface like a mirror, reflecting the moon's silvery light. With their haunting songs, Selene and Thalia summoned the Leviathan from the depths of the ocean. Jack watched in awe as a massive, serpentine creature rose from the sea, its scales glistening like precious jewels. Its eyes, ancient and wise, met Jack's gaze, and he felt a deep connection to the magnificent beast. Together, they cast their lines into the water, and the Leviathan, guided by Selene and Thalia's magic, led them to a titanic struggle. The fishing line tugged and strained, but Jack's strength and determination were matched by the sisters' enchantment and the Leviathan's power. Hours passed, and Jack's exhaustion gave way to exhilaration. He felt alive in a way he never had before, as if he were part of something greater than himself. The Leviathan, too, seemed to revel in the battle, its ancient spirit rejoicing in the challenge. But as dawn broke, the Leviathan's strength began to wane, and Jack knew that it was time to end the struggle. With a final burst of effort, he reeled in the line, and the great beast slipped back into the depths of the sea. Selene and Thalia's songs filled the air, bidding the Leviathan farewell. As the sun rose, Jack felt a profound sense of fulfillment and wonder. He had achieved his dream, and it was thanks to the mysterious sisters and their supernatural connection to the sea. But as he turned to thank them, he was met with an empty cabin. Selene and Thalia were nowhere to be found. Jack's heart sank as he realized that they had vanished as mysteriously as they had arrived. Had it all been a dream, a fleeting encounter with the supernatural? He would never know for sure. But one thing was certain: the allure of the unknown, the danger of desire, and the consequences of making bargains with the supernatural were all too real. As he sailed back to shore, Jack couldn't help but wonder about the sisters, their haunting songs, and the enchanting, perilous adventure he had undertaken. The sea, once tempestuous and treacherous, now seemed to hold secrets beyond his imagination, secrets that would forever haunt his dreams. The cargo ship, named the SS Eternity, sailed through a dense and mysterious fog that had swallowed the sea. It was a vessel lost to the world, forgotten and abandoned, adrift in the obscurity of the mist. The ship's once mighty engines were now silent, and the only sound that filled the air was the eerie moan of the foghorn. On board, ship's engineer Daniel stood alone on the deserted deck, his eyes scanning the impenetrable wall of mist that surrounded him. He had stumbled upon the SS Eternity by sheer chance, a ship that should have been a ghost of the past, yet here it was, very much in the present. His curiosity had driven him to board the forsaken vessel, and now he found himself trapped in a world that defied logic and reason. As he ventured deeper into the ship's labyrinthine corridors, the oppressive atmosphere weighed down on him. The air felt thick with history, as though the ship itself held memories of the past. Daniel's footsteps echoed in the empty hallways, and his breath created ghostly wisps in the cold, damp air. It was then that he first heard it, the faint, echoing whispers that seemed to come from all directions. He couldn't make out the words, but they sent shivers down his spine. Daniel quickened his pace, trying to ignore the unsettling presence that clung to the ship's interior. In the dimly lit engine room, he found a battered logbook with entries that dated back decades. The last recorded date was a chilling revelation. It had been over 50 years since the ship had gone missing. How could this ancient vessel still exist in the modern world? And what had happened to its crew? As Daniel continued his exploration, the whispers grew louder and more insistent, as if the ship itself was trying to communicate with him. He came upon a small, dimly lit room where a radio transmitter sat covered in dust. It crackled to life, and a voice filled with anguish and despair filled the room. "Help us, please, help us," the voice pleaded. Daniel's heart raced as he realized that the voice came from the transmitter, and it was a distress call, a desperate sauce from the past. But how was this possible? The ship's last recorded location was far from where he now stood, lost in the fog. The ghostly apparitions of the ship's crew began to materialize around him, their faces etched with sadness and longing. They appeared as they had in life, wearing the uniforms of sailors from a bygone era. They moved silently, going about their duties as if they were trapped in an eternal loop. Desperation filled Daniel as he realized that these apparitions were the remnants of the ship's long-lost crew, forever bound to this forsaken vessel. Their eyes bore into him, imploring him to understand, to help them. The weight of their unfinished business hung heavily in the air. The ghostly crew guided Daniel to the ship's bridge, where an old maritime chart lay open on a weathered table. The chart depicted a treacherous route through uncharted waters, a route that had led to the ship's disappearance. It was a voyage that had gone terribly wrong, a journey into the unknown that had ended in tragedy. As Daniel studied the chart, he realized that the ship had been seeking a fabled island, a place said to hold the key to the crew's redemption. It was a place that existed only in legend, a destination that had driven the crew to their doom. And now, their souls were trapped in a limbo, unable to move on until their quest was fulfilled. With a heavy heart, Daniel made a decision. He would help the ghostly crew complete their ill-fated voyage, charting a course through the fog-shrouded waters to find the mythical island. It was a perilous journey into the unknown, a journey that defied the laws of time and space. As the ship sailed deeper into the fog, the ghostly crew worked tirelessly, their spectral hands guiding the vessel. The atmosphere was tense, as if the ship itself held its breath, waiting for the moment of redemption. Days turned into weeks, and the fog showed no sign of relenting. Daniel's determination wavered, but he pressed on, knowing that the fate of the ghostly crew depended on him. He could feel their presence, their hopes and fears, urging him forward. Finally, on a night that seemed no different from any other, the fog began to lift. The ship emerged into a clear, starlit sky, and there, on the horizon, lay the mythical island. It was a place of beauty and wonder, bathed in an ethereal glow. As the ship docked at the island's shores, the ghostly crew disembarked, their faces filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. They had found their redemption, their final destination, and now they could move on to the afterlife. Daniel watched as the ghostly figures disappeared one by one, their forms fading into the radiant light of the island, and as the last of them vanished, he felt a sense of peace settle over the ship, a weight lifted from his shoulders. The SS Eternity, once a vessel lost to time, had found its closure. Daniel, the unwitting traveler through time and space, had played his part in the afterlife's unresolved mysteries, bringing redemption to those who had long been forgotten. As the ship sailed away from the mythical island, the dense fog closed in around it once more, shrouding it in obscurity. The SS Eternity vanished into the mist, its secrets and the memory of its lost crew forever etched in the annals of time. Daniel, now alone on the ship, knew that he would carry this haunting tale with him for the rest of his days, a story of the persistence of memory, the power of redemption, and the mysteries of the afterlife. And as he sailed back into the fog, he couldn't help but wonder what other forgotten wonders and terrors lay hidden within the boundless depths of the unknown. The night was dark as pitch, and the moon was hidden behind a thick shroud of ominous clouds. On board the luxury yacht Elysium, the wealthy socialite Olivia hosted a lavish party under the starry sky. The sea, normally serene and inviting, churned with malevolence, as if it resented the opulence that floated upon it. Olivia, dressed in diamonds and silk, reveled in the adoration of her guests. Champagne flowed like water, laughter echoed in the salty breeze, and music filled the air. But beneath the facade of glamour and excess, there was a gnawing unease. The captain and crew exchanged worried glances as they navigated the cursed waters. A dark legend surrounded these seas, a tale of a monstrous entity, the Leviathan, said to devour ships and souls with its insatiable hunger. Olivia had scoffed at such superstitions, believing her wealth and privilege could shield her from any threat. But as the night wore on, the stormy sea grew restless. The waves rose higher and higher, crashing against the yacht's sleek hull. Thunder rumbled ominously, and lightning slashed the sky, revealing brief glimpses of the looming darkness that surrounded them. The revelry on board began to fade as unease settled over the guests. Olivia, determined to maintain her composure, clung to her facade of indifference. However, it was clear that even she was growing uneasy as the yacht was tossed about by the tumultuous waves. Below deck, the crew huddled together, their faces etched with fear. They whispered tales of the Leviathan, tales passed down through generations of sailors. They spoke of its massive, writhing tentacles, its cold, malevolent eyes, and its insatiable hunger for human souls. As the night wore on, the yacht's engines faltered and died, leaving it adrift in the cursed sea. Panic spread among the passengers, and Olivia's veneer of confidence began to crack. She demanded that the captain do something to fix the situation, but the captain could offer no solutions. They were at the mercy of forces beyond their control. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the storm, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone on board. The sea itself seemed to come alive, its dark waters churning and frothing as unseen terrors from the deep rose to the surface. The Leviathan had emerged from the depths, its massive form eclipsing the yacht. Its tentacles, adorned with rows of serrated teeth, reached out hungrily, grasping at the vessel. Panic and chaos reigned as passengers and crew members fought to escape the monstrous grasp of the beast. Olivia, once the epitome of composure, screamed in terror as a tentacle wrapped around her. She struggled to break free, but the Leviathan's grip was unrelenting. With a sickening crunch, the tentacle tightened its hold, and Olivia's lifeless body was pulled beneath the waves. The chaos continued as the Leviathan attacked the yacht, tearing it apart with ruthless efficiency. Passengers and crew members alike were dragged into the depths, their screams drowned out by the roiling sea. The yacht, once a symbol of opulence, was reduced to splintered debris, sinking into the abyss. But for those who survived the initial onslaught, a new horror awaited. As they clung to bits of wreckage, they realized that the Leviathan was not the only threat in these cursed waters. Monstrous, grotesque creatures, spawned from the depths of madness, lurked beneath the waves, their eyes filled with malevolent hunger. The survivors were forced to make a grim choice: stay adrift in the sea and risk being devoured by the Leviathan, or attempt to swim to a nearby island, where the unknown horrors awaited. Desperation drove them to make a fateful decision. As they swam towards the island, the sea around them teemed with monstrous forms, their tentacles and appendages reaching out in a macabre dance of death. The survivors fought for their lives, their screams echoing through the night. Only a few managed to reach the island, their bodies battered and broken, their souls scarred by the horrors they had witnessed. As they looked back at the cursed sea, they could see the remnants of the yacht sinking into the abyss, a grim reminder of the price of privilege and the unknown horrors lurking beneath the surface. The survivors, once wealthy and indulgent, were now stripped of their arrogance and entitlement. They had come face to face with the true terrors of the deep, and the experience had left them forever changed. As they huddled together on the desolate island, they knew that they were the fortunate few who had escaped the Leviathan's fury. But they also knew that they would carry the scars of that night with them for the rest of their lives, a constant reminder of the price of their greed and the horrors that lurked in the unknown depths of the sea. The night was black as coal as the old lighthouse keeper, Samuel, and his daughter, Emily, took refuge on their weathered ship, the Beacon's Rest. The tempest outside raged with unbridled fury, the sea pounding against the treacherous rocky coast. With the lighthouse out of commission for repairs, the ship was their only sanctuary. Samuel, a man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen the relentless power of the sea, held Emily close to his chest. She was a young girl with a spirit as wild as the ocean, and the storm outside terrified her. As the ship creaked and groaned under the onslaught of wind and waves, Samuel whispered soothing words to his daughter, trying to calm her fears. But as the night wore on, the ship seemed to come alive with an eerie presence. Strange sounds echoed through the dimly lit corridors, and shadows danced along the walls. Emily clung to her father, her eyes wide with terror. Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone on the beacon's rest. Suddenly, a mournful wail filled the air, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the ship itself. Samuel's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that the ship was haunted. And they were not the only occupants on this stormy night. The apparition appeared before them, a ghostly figure bathed in an ethereal light. It was the ghost of a lighthouse keeper, dressed in tattered, 19th-century attire. His eyes, filled with anguish and rage, bore into Samuel's soul. It was a vengeful spirit, and it seemed to recognize him. "Samuel," the ghost hissed, its voice a chilling whisper. "You can't escape your family's curse. You will suffer as we suffered." Samuel's blood ran cold as he realized the truth. The vengeful spirit was connected to his family's dark past. Generations of lighthouse keepers before him had been plagued by the curse, and now it had come to haunt him and his daughter. As the night wore on, the haunting visions continued. The ghostly apparitions of lighthouse keepers past appeared, their faces etched with pain and sorrow. They were trapped in an eternal cycle of torment, reliving the horrors that had befallen them. Emily, her young mind unable to comprehend the magnitude of the curse, was plagued by nightmarish visions. She saw the shipwrecks, the lost souls, and the lighthouse keepers who had succumbed to madness. Her father tried to shield her from the horrors, but there was no escape from the relentless onslaught of the past. Desperation drove Samuel to search for answers. He combed through the ship's archives, searching for any clue that might break the curse. In the faded pages of an old logbook, he found a chilling entry. The tale of a lighthouse keeper who had made a terrible pact with a malevolent entity in exchange for power and protection. The entity, known as the Sea Hag, had granted the lighthouse keeper's wish, but at a terrible cost. It had cursed his bloodline for generations, ensuring that each lighthouse keeper would suffer the same fate, reliving the horrors of the past. With this revelation, Samuel knew what he had to do. He had to confront the Sea Hag and break the curse once and for all. He couldn't bear to see his daughter suffer any longer, and he was determined to protect her from the dark legacy of their family. As the storm outside raged on, Samuel and Emily ventured into the heart of the ship, where the Sea Hag was said to reside. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in on them. They reached a chamber deep within the ship, and there, before them, stood the Sea Hag. The entity was a grotesque, otherworldly being, its form a twisted amalgamation of sea creatures and human nightmares. Its eyes gleamed with malevolence as it hissed, "You dare to challenge me, lighthouse keeper?" Samuel stood firm, his love for his daughter giving him strength. He pleaded with the Sea Hag to release them from the curse, to spare Emily from a lifetime of suffering. The Sea Hag considered his words for a moment before letting out a spine-chilling laugh. "Very well, lighthouse keeper. I will release you and your daughter from the curse, but there will be a price." Samuel nodded, willing to pay any price to protect Emily. The Sea Hag's eyes locked onto Emily, and it whispered a chilling promise into her ear, a promise that made her shudder with fear. With a wave of its gnarled hand, the Sea Hag lifted the curse that had plagued Samuel's family for generations. The ship groaned and shuddered as the curse was lifted, and the ghostly apparitions of lighthouse keepers past faded into nothingness. As the storm outside finally began to abate, Samuel and Emily emerged from the haunted ship, their hearts heavy with the weight of their ordeal. They knew that the Sea Hag's promise would forever haunt them, but they were free from the curse, and that was all that mattered. The research vessel Abyss Explorer sliced through the dark, churning waters of the uncharted ocean depths. On board, Dr. Elizabeth Carter, a marine biologist with a relentless thirst for knowledge, led a team of scientists on a groundbreaking expedition. They were on a quest to uncover the mysteries of the abyss, to shed light on the enigmatic creatures that lurked in the deep. As the days turned into weeks, the crew marveled at the wonders of the abyss. They discovered bizarre, bioluminescent creatures that glowed like ethereal stars in the inky darkness. The team's excitement was palpable, and their discoveries were unlike anything the world had ever seen. But as they ventured deeper into the abyss, a sense of unease began to settle over the crew. The crushing pressure of the deep weighed on them, and the unending darkness outside the vessel's portholes played tricks on their minds. Strange phenomena began to occur. Equipment malfunctioned, and unexplainable noises echoed through the hull. The crew started to experience vivid hallucinations, phantom sea creatures, ghostly apparitions, and the sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. Dr. Carter, a rational scientist, tried to dismiss these occurrences as the product of stress and fatigue, but she couldn't ignore the growing unease among her team. Paranoia and distrust festered, and the once cohesive group began to fragment. One night, as the Abyss Explorer descended even deeper into the abyss, the crew witnessed a sight that shattered their understanding of the natural world. From the depths emerged grotesque, nightmarish creatures, abominations of nature that defied all logic and reason. The crew's fear and confusion reached a breaking point. Some believed the creatures were hallucinations, while others were convinced they had stumbled upon something that should never have been discovered. Dr. Carter, torn between her scientific curiosity and her responsibility for her team, grappled with the chilling realization that the abyss held secrets beyond human comprehension. As the days turned into an endless night, the crew's descent into madness became undeniable. They scribbled feverish notes and sketches, attempting to document the horrors they witnessed. The ship's corridors echoed with their frantic whispers, their minds unraveling like frayed threads. Dr. Carter's own sanity teetered on the brink as she struggled to make sense of the inexplicable. She tried to maintain control, to be the voice of reason amidst the chaos, but the abyss had a way of eroding even the strongest will. One by one, the crew members succumbed to the madness. Some locked themselves in their cabins, others babbled incoherently, and a few vanished without a trace. Dr. Carter watched helplessly as her team unraveled before her eyes, their once brilliant minds reduced to gibbering madness. In her darkest moments, Dr. Carter began to doubt her own sanity. She couldn't escape the feeling that the abyss was alive, that it whispered to her in the dead of night, promising forbidden knowledge in exchange for her soul. One fateful night, as the Abyss Explorer reached depths that should have been impossible to survive, Dr. Carter had a chilling revelation. The Abyss was not just a physical place, it was a sentient, malevolent force, a primordial entity that defied human understanding. The creatures they had encountered were not mere anomalies of nature, they were the embodiment of the Abyss's dark will. It reveled in their fear and suffering, feeding on their minds and souls. In a desperate bid to save herself and what remained of her team, Dr. Carter made a harrowing decision. She ordered the Abyss Explorer to ascend, to escape the suffocating grip of the abyss. The ship groaned and protested as it fought against the crushing pressure, but it slowly began to rise. As the vessel breached the surface and the blinding light of day pierced the darkness, Dr. Carter knew that they had escaped the abyss, but not without a heavy toll. The crew members who had survived were mere shadows of their former selves, their minds irreparably shattered by the horrors they had witnessed. Dr. Carter herself was haunted by the knowledge that the abyss still lurked beneath the waves, waiting to ensnare the curious and the foolish. She knew that she had glimpsed a truth too terrible to comprehend, and that the abyss would forever remain a mystery, a dark enigma that defied the boundaries of human knowledge. As the Abyss Explorer sailed away from the accursed depths, Dr. Carter could only wonder how many others would be drawn into the abyss's embrace, lured by the promise of forbidden knowledge, only to be consumed by the depths of madness. The pirate ship, known as the Crimson Serpent, sailed through ghostly waters, its tattered sails billowing in a spectral wind. Captain Blackbeard, once the terror of the high seas, now stood at the helm, his grizzled face etched with the weight of a curse that bound him and his motley crew to a vengeful mariner. The curse had been laid upon them years ago, when they had crossed paths with the vengeful mariner, a ghostly figure with eyes filled with wrath and a thirst for revenge. The mariner had cursed them, condemning them to sail the haunted seas for all eternity, haunted by the tormented souls of those they had wronged. As the Crimson Serpent sailed through the ghostly waters, the crew knew that their only hope of breaking the curse was to find the vengeful mariner and seek his forgiveness. But the mariner was a wily and elusive foe, and he seemed to revel in tormenting them from the shadows. The ghostly waters were treacherous, filled with spectral ships that appeared out of nowhere, their crews seeking vengeance for past deeds. The crew of the Crimson Serpent fought spectral battles, their cutlasses clashing with the ghostly apparitions, but victory always eluded them. Captain Blackbeard, his once feared reputation reduced to a curse, grew increasingly desperate. He had led his crew into a cursed existence, and he would do anything to set them free. He knew that their only chance lay in confronting the vengeful mariner, but finding him was like searching for a phantom in the night. As the days turned into weeks, the crew's morale began to wane. They were tormented by the restless spirits of their victims, their accusatory voices echoing in the ghostly winds. The Crimson Serpent sailed through ghostly storms, lightning illuminating the cursed sea as if the heavens themselves condemned their action. In the dead of night, Captain Blackbeard stood alone on the deck, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the vengeful mariner. He knew that the curse had to be broken, or they would be condemned to this accursed existence forever. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the ship, and the ghostly figure of the vengeful mariner materialized before Captain Blackbeard. The mariner's eyes burned with a cold, vengeful fire, and his voice was like a whisper from the abyss. "Captain Blackbeard," the mariner hissed, "your sins are too great to be forgiven. You and your crew shall suffer for all eternity." Desperation and determination flared in Captain Blackbeard's eyes as he begged for the mariner's mercy. He pleaded for a chance at redemption, a way to atone for their past deeds. The mariner considered his words for a moment before offering a chilling proposition. He would grant them a single chance at redemption, a final trial that would determine their fate. If they succeeded, the curse would be lifted. If they failed, they would be doomed to sail the ghostly waters forever. With a heavy heart, Captain Blackbeard accepted the mariner's terms. The trial was a perilous one. They would have to navigate a treacherous maze of ghostly waters, facing the tormented souls of their victims and overcoming their own inner demons. The crew of the Crimson Serpent embarked on the trial, their determination unwavering. They faced spectral storms that threatened to tear their ship apart and ghostly apparitions that taunted them with their past sin. As they neared the final leg of the trial, Captain Blackbeard knew that their redemption hinged on their ability to confront the darkest depths of their souls. They had to acknowledge the pain they had caused and the lives they had destroyed. In a climactic showdown with the vengeful mariner, Captain Blackbeard and his crew faced their inner demons, their past sins laid bare before them. They acknowledged their guilt and regret, and in that moment of reckoning, the curse was broken. The ghostly waters faded away, and the Crimson Serpent sailed into calm seas under a bright, moonlit sky. Captain Blackbeard and his crew, freed from the curse that had bound them for so long, felt a sense of redemption wash over them. As they sailed into the open sea, they knew that they could never undo the past, but they had been granted a second chance at life. They had faced their sins and sought forgiveness, and in that act of redemption, they had found their freedom. The vengeful mariner, his curse broken, vanished into the night, leaving behind only the memory of his haunting presence. Captain Blackbeard and his crew sailed on, forever changed by their harrowing journey through the depths of madness, forever bound by the knowledge that redemption was possible, even for those who had committed the gravest of sins. The research submersible, AquaQuest, glided through the dark, uncharted depths of the ocean, its powerful floodlights illuminating the eerie ruins of a sunken city. Dr. Eleanor Clark, an archaeologist with a passion for uncovering ancient mysteries, led her team of divers on this expedition of a lifetime. The sunken city, known in legends as the Sunken Cathedral, had long been a subject of fascination and intrigue. Many believed it to be a myth, but Dr. Clark had dedicated her career to proving its existence. Now, as the ruins loomed before them, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. As the divers explored the ancient city, they marveled at its eerie beauty. Elaborate, ornate structures loomed like ghosts from the past, their intricate carvings hinting at a civilization long forgotten by the world above. But the deeper they ventured into the heart of the city, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Strange symbols etched into the walls seemed to shift and writhe, as if alive. The water, once crystal clear, grew murky, and shadows moved in the corners of their vision. Dr. Clark's team began to experience vivid and disturbing dreams. They dreamt of a city teeming with life, but also of a lurking malevolent force that whispered dark secrets in their ears. Some claimed to have seen ancient, eldritch horrors in their nightmares, creatures that defied description. As the days passed, the divers began to feel a growing sense of unease. Dr. Clark was determined to unravel the secrets of the sunken cathedral, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone in the city. It was as if the ancient evil that had once resided there still lingered, watching their every move. One evening, as the divers rested in the submersible, a chilling event occurred. The floodlights outside suddenly flickered and dimmed, casting the submersible into darkness. Panic ensued as they scrambled to restore power, but the darkness seemed to have a life of its own. In the pitch-black abyss outside, something moved. Shadows writhed and twisted, coalescing into nightmarish forms. The divers' breath quickened as they glimpsed the eldritch horrors they had seen in their nightmares emerging from the darkness. Dr. Clark's heart raced as she watched in horror as the ancient malevolence awakened. The creatures outside the submersible clawed at the hull, their eyes filled with malevolence. It was as if the city itself had come alive, and it hungered for the souls of the intruders. With sheer desperation, Dr. Clark and her team managed to restore power to the submersible and escape the clutches of the eldritch horrors. But the encounter left them shaken, their belief in the boundaries of reality shattered. As they continued to explore the sunken cathedral, they uncovered even darker secrets. Ancient texts hinted at rituals and sacrifices performed by the city's inhabitants, rituals that had called forth a malevolent force from the depths of the ocean. The divers' dreams grew more vivid and nightmarish, and they felt the ancient evil's presence closing in on them. They knew that they had to unravel the city's dark history and find a way to break the curse that bound them to the malevolent force. In a chamber deep within the ruins, they discovered an altar adorned with eerie symbols and relics. Dr. Clark, driven by a desperate need to confront the ancient evil, conducted a ritual, hoping to communicate with the malevolent force and seek its forgiveness. As the ritual reached its climax, a deafening roar echoed through the chamber, and the waters around them churned with unnatural fury. The ancient malevolence emerged, a grotesque, nightmarish entity that defied all reason and description. It spoke to Dr. Clark, its voice a cacophony of whispers and screams. It revealed the truth, that it was a being of ancient evil, bound to the city by a curse born of humanity's hubris. It hungered for their souls, and it would never release them from its grasp. A sense of dread settled over Dr. Clark and her team. They realized that they were trapped in a battle against an ancient malevolence that defied all reason and comprehension. Their only hope lay in finding a way to break the curse and escape the clutches of the sunken cathedral. With time running out, the divers embarked on a desperate race against the malevolent force. They delved deeper into the city's mysteries, deciphering cryptic texts and performing rituals in a bid to break the curse that bound them. In a final, harrowing confrontation with the ancient evil, Dr. Clark and her team succeeded in breaking the curse, but not without a heavy toll. The malevolent force, defeated but not destroyed, retreated into the depths of the ocean, leaving the city to crumble into dust. As the divers surfaced, they knew that they had escaped the clutches of the sunken cathedral, but the memories of the ancient evil would haunt them forever. They had tampered with forces beyond human understanding, and the price of their curiosity had been steep. The sunken cathedral, now nothing more than a pile of ruins on the ocean floor, served as a grim reminder of the consequences of seeking knowledge at any cost. Dr. Clark and her team had ventured into the abyss, and though they had survived, they carried with them the weight of a truth too terrible to comprehend. The power of ancient malevolence that lurked in the depths of the ocean, waiting to be awakened once more. The Lucky Lady, a luxurious gambling cruise ship, sailed through the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean. On board, professional gambler Alex joined a motley crew of gamblers and casino staff for what promised to be a night of high-stakes excitement. Little did they know, they were about to embark on a journey into the heart of darkness. As the night fell, the Lucky Lady sailed into a thick, eerie fog that seemed to swallow the ship whole. The fog was so dense that it blotted out the moon and stars, plunging the vessel into a never-ending night. Inside the ship's opulent casino, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Gamblers, both seasoned and novice, gathered around the tables, eager to test their luck. Alex, a master of games of chance, sensed the thrill in the air and decided to join the action. But as the night wore on, something sinister began to unfold. The casino staff, normally composed and professional, grew increasingly jittery. The cards seemed to have a mind of their own, shuffling and dealing in strange patterns that defied logic. Alex's winning streak, which had started so promisingly, took a turn for the worse. The games became increasingly unfair, with the odds stacked against the players. As the stakes grew higher, desperation and greed filled the air, and the gambler's addiction to the thrill of the game began to consume them. Outside the casino, the never-ending night pressed on, and the fog grew thicker, obscuring all signs of the outside world. Passengers who ventured out into the fog reported strange, ghostly apparitions that seemed to beckon them into the darkness. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. It was as if the ship itself had become a malevolent entity, luring its passengers into a never-ending game with no way out. He knew that he had to unravel the mystery of the cursed sea and free himself and the others from its grip. One fateful night, as the casino reached its fever pitch, Alex received an anonymous invitation to a private game in the ship's dimly lit, opulent lounge. Curiosity piqued, he accepted the invitation and followed a shadowy figure into the darkened room. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The other players, a group of strangers with hollow eyes and haunted expressions, sat around a table adorned with an ornate deck of cards. The game, known as the Gambler's Gambit, was said to be a test of skill and luck like no other. As the game began, the cards seemed to come alive, their images shifting and changing before the players' eyes. Alex's opponents revealed themselves to be more than just gamblers. They were trapped souls, ensnared by the curse of the sea. With each hand, the stakes grew higher, and the players' desperation became palpable. It was as if the malevolent entity that controlled the ship fed on their greed and fear, siphoning their souls with every turn of the cards. Alex, determined to outwit the supernatural forces at play, relied on his skills and instinct. He knew that the key to winning the game was not just about luck but about deciphering the patterns and illusions that the cards presented. As the game reached its climax, a sinister figure materialized at the head of the table. It was the embodiment of the malevolent entity that controlled the ship, a dark and spectral presence with eyes that gleamed with malevolence. The figure revealed itself to be the mastermind behind the cursed sea and the never-ending night. It offered Alex a choice: win the game and free himself and the other passengers from the ship's grip, or lose and become another trapped soul doomed to gamble for eternity. With the odds stacked against him and the malevolent entity's power growing with each passing moment, Alex faced the ultimate showdown. He used his wit and skill to unravel the illusions of the cards, exposing the malevolent entity's tricks. In a climactic showdown, Alex defeated the malevolent entity, shattering the curse that had held the ship and its passengers captive. The never-ending night dissipated, and the fog lifted, revealing the open sea once more. The passengers, freed from the grip of addiction and greed, realized the true cost of their obsession with the game. They had been lured into a world of darkness and temptation, and it had taken a master gambler to break the curse that bound them. As the Lucky Lady sailed back into the clear night, its passengers knew that they had narrowly escaped the abyss of the cursed sea. They had learned the consequences of addiction, the allure of temptation, and the darkness that could lie behind the glitz and glamour of a world built on chance and illusion. Alex, having outwitted the malevolent entity, stood at the helm of the ship, his gaze fixed on the endless horizon. He knew that the sea held many secrets, but he had faced the greatest gamble of his life and emerged victorious. The Lucky Lady sailed on, its passengers forever changed by the harrowing journey they had undertaken, a cautionary tale of the price one could pay for the thrill of the game. The Arctic waters stretched out before the whaling ship, the Harpoon as it sailed through the icy expanse. Captain Thomas, a seasoned whaler with a heart heavy with remorse, led his crew on another hunt for the great leviathans of the sea. Little did they know that this voyage would be unlike any they had ever undertaken. The crew of the Harpoon were no strangers to the brutal world of whaling. They had spent their lives chasing the majestic whales, driven by greed and the promise of profit. The ship was a symbol of their relentless pursuit, adorned with harpoons and whaling equipment. But as the hunt began in earnest, a sense of unease settled over the crew. The Arctic winds seemed to carry whispers of discontent, and the ice floes cracked and groaned as if protesting the intrusion of man into their pristine realm. Captain Thomas, haunted by the memories of the countless whales he had killed, knew that their actions had consequences. He had seen firsthand the cruelty and brutality of the whaling industry, and he could no longer ignore the toll it had taken on the oceans and its inhabitants. One fateful day, as the crew harpooned a magnificent humpback whale, something inexplicable occurred. The great whale, writhing in agony, emitted a mournful, otherworldly cry that sent shivers down the spines of the crew. As the humpback whale breathed its last breath, a strange transformation occurred. Its spirit seemed to rise from its massive body, a spectral apparition of pure white that hovered above the ship. The crew watched in stunned silence as the ghostly whale spirit gazed upon them with eyes filled with sorrow and anger. The other whales in the vicinity began to react, as if they sensed the presence of their fallen comrade. They circled the Harpoon, their massive forms casting ominous shadows in the icy waters. It was as if they were mourning their fallen kin and seeking justice for the cruelty inflicted upon them. The crew's unease grew as the ghostly humpback whale spirit led the vengeful pod in a relentless pursuit of the Harpoon. No matter how fast the ship sailed, the spectral whales kept pace, their mournful cries echoing through the Arctic wasteland. Captain Thomas, tormented by guilt and a growing sense of dread, knew that they were being pursued by the spirits of the whales they had hunted. The crew, once eager hunters, were now trapped in a nightmarish hunt of their own. As days turned into nights and the relentless pursuit continued, the crew began to succumb to fear and exhaustion. The ghostly whales showed no mercy, and their haunting presence cast a pall of despair over the Harpoon. In a desperate bid to escape the vengeful spirits, Captain Thomas ordered the crew to jettison their harpoons and whaling equipment, hoping that it would appease the angered whales. But the ghostly pod showed no sign of relenting, and their pursuit grew even more relentless. The crew's desperation reached its peak as they realized the futility of their situation. They had become the hunted, their ship a symbol of their own cruelty and greed. The vengeful spirits of the whales they had killed would not rest until justice was served. In a final, harrowing confrontation, the Harpoon found itself surrounded by the spectral whales. The Arctic waters churned with their rage, and the ship was tossed and buffeted by their ghostly forms. Captain Thomas, standing on the deck with a heavy heart, knew that there was no escape. The time for reckoning had come. He addressed the ghostly humpback whale spirit directly, his voice filled with remorse and regret. "I am sorry," he whispered, his words carried away by the Arctic winds. "We were blind to the consequences of our actions, to the suffering we caused. We deserve your anger and your judgment." The ghostly humpback whale spirit regarded Captain Thomas for a moment, its eyes filled with sadness and understanding. And then, in a breathtaking display of power, it signaled to the other spectral whales. The vengeful pod of whales circled the Harpoon one final time, their mournful cries fading into the distance. As they disappeared beneath the icy waters, the crew of the whaling ship knew that they had been spared, that their lives had been granted a reprieve. But Captain Thomas also knew that they had been forever changed by their harrowing encounter with the vengeful spirits. They had learned the consequences of cruelty, the price of exploitation, and the power of nature's wrath. The Harpoon sailed away from the Arctic waters, its crew forever haunted by the memories of the ghostly pursuit. Captain Thomas, once a remorseful whaler, vowed to devote his life to environmentalism and conservation, to make amends for the sins of his past. As the ship disappeared into the horizon, the Arctic expanse stretched out before them, a pristine realm untouched by man's greed and cruelty. The spirits of the whales, though vengeful, had delivered a powerful message, a reminder of the importance of respecting the natural world and the consequences of exploiting its treasures.